Today I'm going to talk about why I think the 2 pounds of food per day rule is just a disaster waiting to happen. If you're not familiar with the rule, it's just that. The recommendation is to pack 2 pounds of food per day that you're in the backcountry. Sounds pretty straightforward, but if you watched any of our other videos, you know that nutrition in the backcountry is anything but straightforward. Now, if you're not familiar with our channel, my name is Erin Owens-Mayhew. I'm a registered dietitian, ultralight long-distance backpacker, and the owner of backcountryfoodie.com, which is where we offer ultralight recipes and meal planning resources for backpackers. And another little interesting tip about me is that I live full-time with my husband and our dog in a van in the backcountry. So my passions truly are backpacking food and living in the wilderness. So back to how much food to pack. As a dietitian, I'm asked that all the time. Folks ask me, how many calories should I take for a trip? And unfortunately, I'm not able to give you that number, so I don't want to set you up for disappointment today, but I am going to give you the tips and resources to be able to figure out that magic number yourself. My best bit of advice is to do a few things. It's going to require a little bit of homework, but you're really going to be happy that you took the time to do it. So number one, I really recommend that you do what we call as dietitians a 24-hour recall. And what that means is just take a look at what you eat on an everyday basis on a non-hiking day and just kind of get an idea of what your baseline calorie needs are. Then from that, you can start kind of figuring out what you need on hiking days. So number two, I recommend keeping a hiking food journal. And in that, you can just start keeping track of how much food did you pack? How much food came back with you? Was that enough? Was that too much? How did you feel? Was it a really hard hike? Was it an easy hike? Just start taking some notes, and then you're going to have a better idea of how many calories you need, because each hike is going to be so completely different. So step number three I recommend is reading food labels. You're probably already doing this, but maybe look at it a little bit more specifically, because you don't necessarily want to just have high calorie foods, but you also want to have lots of carbs and fiber and protein so that you recover every day. By doing this, you might actually be able to carry less food than what you're already doing now. And after much trial and error, this is actually what I've come up with what works for me. 3,500 calories works really well for, let's say, just a weekend hike, maybe 10-mile days, relatively easy terrain, and not a really heavy backpack. Now 4,000 calories works a little bit better on maybe, let's say, a 5-day hike that I'm carrying a little bit heavier backpack because there's more food. Let's say I'm a little bit harder terrain, a little less rest because we're hiking more hours, so I need a few more calories. But then on the PCT a few years ago when I attempted a through hike, I had 5,000 calories a day when I was hiking 20 miles per day, and a relatively heavy backpack at the time because I was still learning how to be an ultralight backpacker, but the 5,000 calories worked really well. And then on the AT that same year, I needed over 6,000 calories because I was pulling over 24 miles a day, carrying actually an even lighter pack, but I was going so much faster and the terrain so much different than the PCT. So actually, there were times I even went into town and ate even more food than what was already in my backpack. Now, what do these calorie levels actually weigh? For me, I try to average 150 calories per ounce over a 24-hour time period. Now, that doesn't mean that all my foods are 150 calories per ounce each. Some are going to be lower, some are going to be higher. That's just an average over the course of the day. So for that 3,500 calories at 150 calories per ounce, that means my food really only weighed just under 1.5 pounds per day. At the 5,000 calories for the PCT, my food weighed just over 2 pounds per day. And then at 6,000 calories per day on the AT, I was actually closer to 2.5 pounds per day. So with these examples, you can see why I'm not a fan of the 2 pound per day rule. Maybe you're a brand new hiker. You're going out for your first overnight trip, or maybe your first 5-day trip. Taking 2 pounds of food per day when you really only need that 1.5 pounds is a lot of extra weight that you have to carry. And if you're an ultralight backpacker, that truly defeats the purpose of counting grams for every other piece of gear that's in your backpack. Now let's say you're that through hiker that's hiking 20 plus miles a day and you're starving, and let's say you pack 2 pounds a day of food, then you're underpacking and you're risking bonking, and then you're going to be miserable just because you don't have enough food. So I hope today's video will encourage you to start looking at food labels, start taking into account how much you eat at home, because sometimes you'll realize you actually eat more at home than you do on trail. So sometimes this is really eye-opening. And then if you can start keeping a hiking food journal after a few times, I think it's really going to help you dial in how many calories you need, not how many calories all these blogs and videos tell you you need. So until next time, happy trails.